There are still some people who don't believe that dissociative identity disorder is real. I'm Jenna, we're the D.D.N.O system. Let's talk about it. So I just finished the book Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me, by Carol Tavis and Elliot Arnson. And it's talking about like cognitive bias and how we justify things and, good stuff, fascinating. But there's a whole chapter in there dedicated to false memories and dissociative identity disorder and how it's not real. And I really was like, I would love to sit down with these people. So I'm basically going to do that here, and y'all can come along for the ride. So in their book, they talk about how there's been plenty of evidence of like dolphins bringing people into sea and keeping them from drowning. And you could then posit that dolphins are a helpful animal. But the fallacy here is we don't know how many people dolphins have actually drug out to sea and drowned, because how would you find that out? So you can't just say this one thing. I'm going to apply that to D.I.D. One of their big arguments is that it is therapist created and that use of hypnosis is involved. They conflate false memories with D.I.D, which is, one will just say these are not the same thing. So we'll just separate that there. Two different things to study, and I'm just going to be focusing on D.I.D. So they talk about how because of Sybil, D.I.D has been like a fad diagnosis. I'll start by saying the first thing we see that's been detailed about multiple personality you see in 1791, and it was called an exchanged personality of a French 20-year-old. This isn't a new concept in literature. You'll see it in some cultures where we are legion for we are many, or I am not proposing that Walt Whitman had D.I.D, but if you don't have language for it, Walt Whitman says, do I contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict myself. I am large, I contain multitudes. So, this isn't like an idea that's new historically just since Sybil. I will say though, once you have language for something, you can recognize it. It is a well-documented phenomena. Without language to describe something, we don't experience it. So if you look up historically people not seeing the color blue, it's fascinating. Cultures without a word for blue don't perceive it. They put it under lists of other colors. They have trouble distinguishing it. Like, absolutely fascinating. But once you have a word for the color, it's so distinct. How would you even say it's like a shade of green? It's blue. Without language to describe what you're experiencing, the brain processes it completely differently. So, since the language for this has been developed, of course you see more people going, oh, that's what I'm experiencing, because they now have a color blue to be like, oh, I've been blue, like everyone else is green and I'm blue. It's different. So you see this with a lot of diagnosis. You see this with autism spectrum where people are in ADHD. Oh, does everybody now have ADHD? No, but now we have language and we have diagnostic criteria, and we can say it was there. It was there. There are instances in historical writings where you can see, oh, that person really was probably on the spectrum, but because there wasn't language for it, like there's not like, oh, Einstein was on the spectrum. But if you look historically, like my dude didn't wear socks because the texture, we can only speculate at this point because Einstein's not around anymore. That diagnosis wasn't a thing at that time. Like it wasn't a widespread thing that he could be like, yes. So language allows us to better understand and categorize our reality. So yes, we have seen an uptick in cases, but I would argue that's because there's now language for it. The authors go so far as to dismiss dissociation at the end of chapter 4. Dissociation is widely documented. You can see this with people who black out when they're angry, literally have no memory of what happened, even if sometimes what happened was violent. So dissociation, widely scientifically studied. I would really encourage the authors to look at the disconfirming evidence for their theory towards dissociation, because there's a lot of it. I'm going to read a quote, and so I know this would be hard for people who hold the other view, because as the authors of Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me say, that you cannot go back without great psychological difficulty when you've caused harm with a theory that is maybe not so. And 100% them encouraging that dissociation isn't even a thing can cause harm. And so I think it will be hard for people of that position to come back. It would take great psychological difficulty, according to the authors. But it's worth the work to look at the disconfirming evidence of your point of view. So one, there's so much disconfirming evidence for dissociation isn't a thing. There's lots of scientific literature on that. One of their issues is with there not being a ton of research on D.I.D, which is true. There is not a ton of research, in part because people are like, it's not a thing. Why would you study something that's not a thing? Right? So much more research is needed. However, there is research on it. There are brain scans on it, which they say, that's a vague thing. That you can't really take that. I would argue that as dissociation and dissociative identity disorder occurs in the brain, the best way to research it is with brain imaging and brain studies. If you were looking for a broken bone, you would be doing x-rays. If you're looking for abnormalities in the way a brain functions, you're going to be doing brain imaging. So to disregard the brain imaging studies that have been done on D.I.D, I think is definitely part of the bias confirming that they're talking about happening in the book. One of the studies I would encourage them to look at is that of a German woman who was blind, and after therapy, and they poo-poo like this being therapeutically induced. So after therapy, they found that she has D.I.D and some of her alters were sighted, they could see. So they did brain imaging on this woman and could see that the visual cortex was stimulated when she said she could see and was not stimulated when she said she couldn't. When she said, this alter can't see, that altered state literally was not receiving visual input. So that's not vague. The visual cortex is a very specific brain region that lights up when the brain is receiving visual input. I would really encourage them to go and look at these studies with a new but still critical eye. All right, now I want to talk about the dolphin dragging people out to sea. So they have these instances where they say, well, this happened after therapy, so therefore D.I.D is therapeutically induced. That did not happen to me. We don't know how many people that dolphins have dragged out and drowned. Not only can I say that I was experiencing symptoms of D.I.D before therapy, but I have some physical things that you can look at to consider. So I have journaled my whole life. I don't have my journals from earlier days. I know I had one in 4th grade, that's lost. However, after I started therapy, a therapist was like, hey, I'd like you to make a timeline. And so I have my journals that I went back through in order to do that timeline. Oh, and I would like to state on it being therapeutically induced. They're very critical of therapists digging into the past. I went to therapy because I had a dissociative episode. I didn't know that's what it was. I didn't have language for it. I knew I went numb for several days and I lost time. I couldn't remember what had happened. And my husband was very concerned. Like, there's also outside witnesses to this. My husband was very concerned. And so I started going to therapy. The therapist did what a good therapist will do, and what the authors are like, this is what the therapist should do. My therapist did that. They worked on safety and stability. They worked on helping me to be able to tolerate my emotions and being in my body, and what I considered panic attacks, being able to breathe through and stay with that. So my therapist did exactly what they say a therapist should do. In the course of doing this, once I reached a place of stability, I started to hear another voice in my head. And this was not in the therapist's office. This was at home, and I told my spouse, and I was very concerned. And then I went to my therapist, who had not dealt with D.I.D before. So one of the big things is if the therapists who treat this, they're a hammer and they see everything as a nail. My therapist had not dealt with this before. She started doing a lot of research to try and figure out how to treat me. So this was something that came up as I had been healing, came up cognitively for me. But as we can see in my journals, it was something I was experiencing before, but did not have words to explain. So I have a journal entry from '96. Now, at this point, I believe I'm in 8th grade. I have not heard of, I have not read Sybil, I've not watched Sybil. I don't know that I'd heard of it because I was in 8th grade. I don't remember what I'd heard of or not, but I for sure had not encountered it. So this wasn't influencing me. This wasn't a fad. This is an 8th grade girl just trying to survive. And I say, it's been one of those days. Clearly, this is a common experience. It's been one of those days. It seems like I've been walking through a dream. At times, I want to wake up. Other times, I just want to zone out. Weird, huh? I've been addressing myself in the third person, and it's getting annoying. And when I went back to do my timeline, I started tagging things. So you'll see tags, because I was like, oh, this was something that I was experiencing. Walking through a fog, addressing myself in the third person. One of those days. Let's go to another journal entry, shall we? This is the next year later. I stayed up late last night. I feel like I'm in a trance, a strange lack of emotions. I feel pleasant anyway. And then I go on to detail my religious struggles. I feel like I'm in a trance, a strange lack of emotions. This is what if you look up dissociation, this is going to be in one of the examples of dissociation. I didn't have a word. I didn't know what to call it, but that's what I was experiencing. So that's 9th grade. Oh, here we go. We'll skip forward. This is after I graduated. A poem story that I wrote. I'm not going to read the whole thing because of time, but I'll flash it on the screen and you're welcome to pause it. I left it in my ref form, even though there's a finished form somewhere out there. But the story is me yelling at someone and telling them all about the things I didn't like about them. And at the end, I say, perhaps she treats you like that though, because when she sees you, she really sees me. Then I walked away from my reflection. So here I am, pardon me, addressing somebody, having a full-on conversation with them, and they are me. And this was one of my creative writings. Moving on. Let's see here. There's a lot of these, and I'm not even gonna hit all of them. I'm just gonna hit some of the bigger ones. That's the cream. Here we go. Now, I had dreams for a while about the ocean and never being able to quite get to the ocean. And I finally had a dream where I was at the ocean. It was big and it was overwhelming and it was beautiful. And I understand the dream. The ocean is now. I finally found now. I think I lost it as a kid. My mom is probably right. I'm not ADD. This is my coping mechanism, or my coping method. When I was little, I couldn't stand now because now my father was yelling. Now I was hiding. Now I was afraid. So I learned to take my mind away from now as often as possible. And I'm learning to live in now, to feel its waves crashing over me. It's a little daunting, but so satisfying. This is well before I'm diagnosed. This is in 2005. And then in 2006, I have a dream. In this dream, let's see here, there is a man who lives in England, and a woman who is his sister appeared. She has lived away from him because it wasn't safe, because their father was not stable. And so they find a place where they're going to live together. Now, I woke up from this dream upset because I knew something was going to change, and that there's so many people in my life you can ask about because the change was drastic. After this, I started dressing feminine, wearing makeup, earrings. Like, this is what they would call a fusion between parts. I didn't know, I didn't have words for, and it happened nonetheless, not in therapy, without having correct terminology for it, without being guided by anybody. Just as I was seeking my own mental health and having a stable home life. But I say the people in the dream are me, as I'm thinking about it. The first is a part of me that died. The young man is who I am. The woman is part of me I put away in 4th grade when I stopped wearing dresses and jewelry. That was a very marked change because, once again, it was something I did every day. I put her away because she is fragile, a woman, and I am terrified of her coming out for those same reasons. You can pause and look, and this is just me trying to sort it out. And here you can see a later edition going, oh, that's E, that's Lil, that's what's going on in this dream that I had. But there was a radical change of self that all my family can document that happened outside of therapy before I was in a therapeutic office learning what was going on it being therapeutically induced as well. I have a relative who went through what I went through. Their life is not so stable. Their children refer to distinct persons. Oh, Mambo's out. Great, it's gonna be like this tonight. They're not claiming to have D.I.D, but their children notice distinct personality changes that are named. They have all these symptoms. They're not in therapy at all. Just because they don't have a name for what they're experiencing doesn't mean they're not also experiencing it. Just because it's not documented that this dolphin took them out to sea doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. Also, one of the big things that the authors hit on, and I see hit on in the people who say it's not real, in those communities say it's brought on by hypnosis or EMDR. I did not have either. I have had now, and you can see in, my whatever, the experience I've had with EMDR, but I had not had either. My relative has never had any of these techniques. So I urge you, please look at the disconfirming evidence against your stance, because it's there. There's a lot of it, and there are actually plenty of studies. There's not as many as we would like because people say it's not a real thing, and then it doesn't get as much research attention. This has been a longer video than normal, and I'm sure I've missed some things, but I know these are the big points that I see people who say D.I.D isn't real bring up. And I hope if you're one of those people that you will go and look at the disconfirming evidence. As they say in Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me, if you're not looking at the disconfirming evidence, all you have is things that confirm your bias. So, at the very least, I think we can all agree, more research is needed. Thank you. I would really encourage the authors to look at the non-confirming evidence of, that's not it, what is this word? Please, at least agree with me on this. We need more research into this topic. Without more research, like, we'll just be, you'll say your thing and I'll say my thing and you'll go, but research, and I'll go, can I have some research, please? Like, yes. All right, let's try that ending again. Ooh. Oh, wow. Yeah, The House of Black and White. That's a great poem. Okay. Bonus, like, this is a poem I wrote about, like, dancing with a shadow me. Am I me or am I you? Like, what's real? It's been a consistent theme. Okay.